Wreck sites have been protected by law for 50 years now, but how does protection work when it comes to enforcement? Dave said earlier that the biggest threat to our protected wreck sites is the environment, and I completely agree with him. But the threat of heritage crime is a big one too, and it's perhaps one of the more frustrating ones with a heritage management hat on, and that's what I'm going to focus on now. Over the last 15 years, the heritage agencies and the wider sector have made great progress in defining and tackling heritage crime. We even have a word for it now, heritage crime, and that's a great step forward. But there's been a series of initiatives, and I'm going to highlight some of the work that has taken place and is ongoing, and look at the next steps in helping tackle marine heritage crime. I'm delighted really to be here updating everyone on some of the schemes I'm talking about, as a lot of them have been a long time in the development. Some of you here today know me. You know that I spent 10 years working for Historic England, and towards the end of my time there, I was increasingly really very frustrated that we didn't have all the tools we needed to effectively manage England's protected wreck sites. Since then, though, there have been many notable developments, such as the Site Security Champion Scheme, the high-profile development of underwater forensic marking techniques, and the forthcoming Common Enforcement Manual. And all of these developments shouldn't be seen in isolation, but rather as a wider suite of tools that will enable us to really offer physical protection to sites from the threat of heritage crime. So how did it all get started? Well, before I go there, I do just want to say that I recognise that the vast majority of all divers, like the rest of the population, are honest and law-abiding. However, as with every area of life, there's a small minority who are not, and who are prepared to take from wreck sites for financial gain, or even see what they're doing as not actually committing a heritage crime, but simply as perhaps taking a souvenir from a special dive, which is absolutely fine on an undesignated site, but it isn't on one protected by law. And there's not that many of them, so it's really important we actually protect those sites. Raising awareness of and helping to prevent heritage crime is really important to all of us at MSDS, and my frustration working at Historic England led me in this direction, but our team also includes two others with a marine heritage crime special interest, and I'd just like to flag them here and thank them for all that they do. Many of you will know Becky Austin, who was Deputy Receiver of Rec alongside Alison for many years, and who has now joined our team. And I also work alongside Jenny Kent. Some of you may know her as Jenny Black. She left Maritime Archaeology for quite a long period to work for the police, and she's now back in Maritime Archaeology, which sort of gives her quite a unique skill set, really. So as well as thanking them for all they do, I'm naming them now as if any of you ever need any help or advice, any one of the three of us will be willing to chat and help provide it. So I said it's a small minority, but even a small minority can have really big effects on our heritage. And a series of high-profile cases led to the need to act. So in 2010, the torpedo loading hatch from the remains of the Holland 5 submarine, it sank off Sussex in 1912, so it's quite an early and important submarine. It was noticed to be missing and presumed stolen. In fact, Mark reported it to me when I was at Historic England. Then around 2015, a unique bronze cannon was stolen from a protected wreck site off Dunwich in Suffolk, and the whereabouts of both the bow cap and the cannon are presently unknown. In addition, around the same time, Historic England had a number of reports of attempted crimes relating to protected wreck sites. One notable area for reporting of this crime was within the Kent Heritage Watch area on the Goodwin Sands, where divers had observed people seeming to prepare to dive on these protected sites, and intelligence suggested that the sites were being deliberately targeted. So we had all this information that this stuff was happening, but we could never quite catch it happening, which was really frustrating. Since those items that I mentioned were lost, and due to that ongoing intelligence, archaeologists became really increasingly concerned over the security of protected wreck sites, especially sites where there were bronze cannon or other high value or collectible material. And sites with smaller artefacts are particularly attractive in respect of unlawful souvenir hunting. It's one thing to recover a cannon, but where you've got smaller items, say the Reeswick, where you've got coins, it's a lot easier to put them in your pocket. So there were a lot of issues with these sites. I do want to say right at this point, it's not all doom and gloom. We've come a huge way talking marine heritage crime in the last 10 to 15 years. I've told this story a lot, but I'm going to tell it again now because I might not have told it to all of you. And I remember in my early days at Historic England having to report the torpedo loading hatch theft to Sussex Police, Mark having reported it to me in the first place. And it's fair to say my first attempt was an absolute disaster. The police call handler wanted to know if they needed to get anti-terrorism involved because they were really concerned that a torpedo might have been stolen. Once we'd cleared that up and made it apparent that that wasn't the case, they wanted to give me a crime reference number for my insurance claim, which again really kind of wasn't what I needed. My second attempt followed a long preparation session with Mark Harrison. He's head of heritage crime at Historic England, and the contribution he's made to the fight against heritage crime, both marine and terrestrial, it's really very important. He gave me a script to follow with important information such as Home Office reporting code and the name of the police heritage crime lead for the area. And that really put me on a level playing field with the call handler and enables us to talk the same language, which is really important in heritage crime cases. What followed was a series of high-profile marine heritage crime success stories, notably the London investigation that resulted in prosecution. But there were still really huge frustrations around high-value and collectible materials. Sorry, I've skipped some slides there. If you go on eBay today, you'll find a number of items that have come from protected wreck sites, including those shown here. And I found these at lunchtime, so that they are currently on eBay. Some items do not say they're from protected wrecks, but I suspect they are. And I'm not implying that any of the items shown here were recovered from sites illegally. Let's get that straight. They may well have been recovered legally and declared to the receiver of wreck, but that could be part of the problem. How can you even tell from a listing online? Some items, like the one here from Invincible, do explicitly say when they were recovered and give their legal status, but others, like the dead eye from the Colossus, is said to be recovered by a diver in the Scillies, really don't say when or who recovered them, and so you can't tell if it's legally recovered material. And I can't tell you how frustrating this is when trying to look after the sites. So how do we even start to tackle marine heritage crime? Well, everyone who's here now, that's how, and that's what kick-started the Site Security Champion Scheme. The project was funded by Historic England, and it was a partnership between us at MSDS and the Protected Wreck Association. The wider project identified quite a few areas of work, and not all of them are relevant today, so I'm not going to talk about them. But the Site Security Champion Scheme and the associated risk assessments that we've developed and put in place are, so I'm going to talk about those. We all know maritime archaeology by its very nature. It's out of sight of most people. It's beneath the waves. And even as divers, we can't see it the majority of the time because we're not even underwater. Even intertidal wrecks are often remotely located and hard to monitor. Maritime archaeology is essentially just as at risk from heritage crime as terrestrial archaeology, perhaps more so in some instances due to the high value nature of cargoes. And when it is a target of crime, it can be even harder to spot and react to. But everyone sat here now, all licensees and their teams, all divers, they form the local monitoring that is going to be needed to help tackle it. So the first step in the scheme was to start to identify what we've called a site security champion. The site security champion is a named local contact, and they're named within a site security protocol document, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And they take the lead in completing that document and liaising with authorities, including the police and agencies such as Coast Watch. The role of the site security champion also includes annual completion of a risk assessment calculator. The project wants to support them with a toolkit, including things like high-vis vests, badges, and these credit card-sized prompt cards with a quick reference guide to enable them to efficiently and smoothly report a crime to the police. And that comes back to what I said about me reporting the crime on the Holland 5. Having that script and that Home Office reporting code in front of you is really important. The importance of the scheme can't be underestimated. Site security champions and the wider protected wreck teams are the eyes and ears on and near the water and really do make effective prevention and enforcement of heritage crime a possibility. I want to flag here the work of Jane Maddox. Jane has done loads to take the site security scheme to scheduled sites too. Jane said yesterday about a need to change our language around protected wreck sites and refer to all sites so that those protected under the 73 Act and those scheduled under the 79 Act, all of them are protected sites. And I couldn't agree more with this. And the fact that Jane is helping get the word out to scheduled protected wrecks too is really very important. A key aim of the project was to work with protected wreck sites stakeholders. And from this point on, I'm going to refer to all sites, no matter what legislation they're protected under, as protected wrecks. And we wanted to work with people to create site security protocols and a template and guidance note for their future creation, because this scheme has to stand up once the project is finished. The site security protocol created by Ron Howell and the Southwest Maritime Archaeology Group for the Salcombe, Cannon and Moor Sand sites has really long been recognised as an example of best practice, and it's made an exceptional contribution to the management of those two sites. I'm hoping that most of you stayed and listened to Ron's wonderful talk at lunchtime in the licensee Why Would You Do it session, and Ron talked about the scheme then, and it really has been an important piece of work. You can see a photo of Ron, Jim and Neville here, and I'm sure they wouldn't have really realised what an impact the work they did would have. And the work, especially of Ron, in setting up that security protocol really has helped inform everything that this project has gone on then to develop. So I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Ron. It's been really important work that you have been doing. The new protocols and guidance documents are available in the members area of the Protected Wreck Association website. We've been working with a site security champion for each of the sites, for people who've come forward and want to work with us, to complete a protocol and to help enable them to make links to local enforcement officials, including local heritage crime officers within the police and local inshore fisheries and conservation authority officers and harbour masters, among others. Out of the 57 sites currently designated in England under the Protection of Wrecks Act, we now have 8 operational site security protocols, with a further 8 which are kind of there to be signed off. I'm afraid I don't have the number from Jane that have been completed for the scheduled sites, which I have to say is a complete oversight on my part. So sorry, Jane, and if you are still here, feel free to stick anything about that in the chat and I will try and update everyone. But in addition, the template and guidance will enable further documents to be easily created in future. At least that's what we're hoping. So how do you assess the level of risk to a heritage crime occurring at a protected wreck site? Well, what we've done is develop a supporting wreck site security risk calculator. And you can see a screenshot of some of it there now. It's based in Microsoft Excel because we thought that was easy for everyone to use, and it's simple and straightforward to complete. And at the end, it produces a report which will be attached to that site security document before it's circulated. I should say there are actually 2 risk calculators now, so one for each type of legislation, as each have slightly different associated risks and systems. So, for example, the protected wreck sites for sites under the 73 Act calculator, it asks about licensees being present, because if there is a licensee on the site, it inherently reduces the risk to that site because somebody's looking after it. Scheduled sites don't have that in quite the same way, and so the questions are different on the calculator for that. The Wreck Site Security Risk Calculator report that's produced at the end, it states the level of risk the site is at from a heritage crime, and it describes the nature of the risk and gives quick win opportunities to site security champions to easily improve site security and to reduce that risk level. Opportunities are activities that are quick and easy to do that will make a difference to the site security. So it could be, for example, putting up posters or signage in the harbour to increase local knowledge of the site and highlight the risks to it from heritage crime. There's some really easy win opportunities. And scoring risk in this way allows enforcement officers like the police and heritage managers like Historic England to target their limited resources where they are going to have the most effect. The scheme, I think, has been incredibly important, but to ensure it continues to work, it needs to really be embraced by the wider licensee and archaeology community and become an annual thing that is revisited, perhaps alongside annual licensee reports, for example. It can make a big difference, but what about when it doesn't work and things are actually taken for protected wreck sites? Well, that leads me nicely to forensic marking. I really am quite made up that we're at the point now where I can talk to you about this project. It's been a long time coming, and it's been a project that MSDS have delivered with funding from Historic England, as well as the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands. And it was first commissioned back in 2018 when I was still at Historic England. So it was my baby then, and it's sort of become a bit of my baby now as well. I attended a heritage crime conference at Leeds Castle around 2016, I think it was. And I was so jealous of all the products like smart water that were being used to help protect terrestrial heritage assets, that Historic England were able to put out a tender to try and get someone to develop something that could be used underwater for the first time. And as I say, I'm now delighted that that's moved on. The tender went out. I wasn't involved with it at the time at Historic England because I've moved on, and now I'm involved from the MSDS side of things. So the project had 4 aims. It wanted to identify the best way of protectively marking underwater cultural material, and that's where developing forensic marking solutions is relevant. It wanted to provide an effective deterrent and to prevent unlawful removal or damage to historic wrecks. Providing the deterrent is a huge part of the project. We don't want the illegal activity to even happen in the first place. So therefore, the more we talk about things like forensic markings is going to be a deterrent. We wanted to provide law enforcement agencies with the ability to accurately identify the provenance of objects or artefacts, either as part of a criminal investigation or as part of a process of due diligence. It's one thing to be able to recover artefacts and know where they come from, but it's another to be able to prove it beyond any doubt. And that's really what we wanted to do. And then finally, we wanted to engage with and help communities and volunteers care for marine heritage assets. And I'll touch on that again later. So, what is the project? Well, development has been very complex due to a lot of unknowns and the use of new technology. And I think everyone here knows that the minute you go and do something underwater, it's a lot more complex than doing it on land. And on top of that, we've had a global pandemic that hasn't helped speed things up either. And I feel a bit sort of cheeky, really, sitting here in 2023 and still blaming the pandemic, but it did have a huge impact on the project. The products that we developed had to be suitable for deployment underwater, both in terms of durability and environmental friendliness. There's probably a better term for it than that, but I'm struggling to think of one at this time on a Sunday. 2 different products with several variations on the main products were developed simultaneously. So all fulfilled the brief, but they had different application methods, different characteristics, and potentially different suitability for use on different sites and environments. We recognised quite early on that if we developed 2 products, it gave us more options in the long run, as well as providing 2 methods for enforcement agencies to actually look for in their investigations. The thinking behind that is that using these 2 different methods will make detection and avoidance harder, thus potentially further decreasing heritage crime. So we had 2 products, and that was probably back in 2019 that these products were identified. So why has it taken so long to be talking about them? Well, to be quite honest, a project like this requires a lot of environmental testing and toxicology reporting. After all, none of us really wanted to be in a position where we killed all the fish. So that took quite a long time. And after discussion with the Marine Management Organisation, we were finally able to demonstrate that our products are safe, which has been really important. So what is the product? Well, oh, hang on, I've done that one. What's that? Next step, sorry, moving on. Once we had the products, the next step was testing them. Both products have now undergone vigorous testing in a marine saltwater environment, and that was over a period of 4 months. And the best bit, I'm delighted to say at the end of that 4 months, is they work. But I do want to advise caution here. The initial test site was a harbour, which, as we all know, it's a relatively benign environment compared to some of the highly dynamic and exposed seabeds, which we're all used to working on. We now have 2 products that have been identified as the best to take forward to full development. They're durable, they're easily identifiable, and that's important. But most important, for any future project, we have safety data sheets and we have environmental toxicology reporting for both products that show the product is safe for the marine environment. We do not want to kill any marine animals in the course of protecting heritage, and that would kind of shoot us all in the foot, really. And it's been an important part of the development process. I'm told the products are essentially food safe, and we've joked about it a lot in the office, but we haven't put it to test yet, but who knows in future. At this stage, I'd love to be able to tell you more about the products and show you some really cool images of it in action, including how to detect it. And I have to say those images are amazing, but I can't, at least for now. Keeping the exact methods of deployment and composition of the product secret is really important to help ensure we have the best chance of success with detection and prosecution in future. It feels really strange talking to you about something that I can't actually talk about. What I can say, though, is that both products are stable, they're environmentally friendly, and they're easy to apply and easy to find. Ease of application and cost has been considered throughout the development. We've said it a lot this weekend, maritime archaeology is not well known for its big budgets. An ultimate aim, and this goes back to the aim 4 earlier on, would be to give forensic marking packs to site security champions to enable swift marking of high-risk items as they emerge on the seabed. And I'm hoping we'll get to that point in the sort of following years. Both projects can be used to establish if artefacts have come from a particular wreck, and even if divers have been in contact with that wreck. And what I will say, to counter questions I've already been asked by a diver, is that the projects will stay around for a long time and they will not be removed easily, even in acid. And I think that's really quite important to be able to say. This year, so last month, we were able to move on to the next stage of the project and deploy both forensic marking products on a number of protected wreck sites. This enabled our team to start to understand how actually best deploy the products underwater to prevent transfer to both us and to our equipment. And you can see Tom in the photos here wearing a rubber glove on his hand, and he wears that on the hand that will touch the products. And when marking has taken place, the glove can simply be taken off, it can be turned inside out, and it can capture the waste products inside that glove. And then they're put in a Ziploc bag and taken back to our unit where we dispose of them securely. The deployment on actual protected wreck sites means testing is now taking place in the actual environment where we need these products to work in future. A range of sites were chosen specifically to ensure we had deep sites, highly mobile seabeds, and a range of items to actually mark. I'd love to share more on the sites chosen, one of which has been named in the press, and that's the Klein Hollandia, and on the areas of the sites we marked. But again, I won't do that until we have our first prosecution and it comes out in court. Coming back to Lauren's presentation this morning about women in maritime archaeology, I just want to flag that while Tom is a star of all these photos, they were actually being taken by Jenny, who was behind the camera, as we very much had an evenly split team for this project. Warning signs were deployed on some, but not all of the wrecks to show that it had been forensically marked. And again, that aids the use of the markings as a deterrent. We want to be working to install warning posters in local harbours and marinas later this year too. Sorry, I'm just flicking everywhere. The work has been extremely high profile, it's been picked up a lot in the media, and it's really easy to see why. I cannot overstate enough that this is a game changer for how we manage and enforce protection. Historic England did several interviews. I even got to go on Radio 4's World at one, and hopefully I didn't say anything too stupid. Even they asked me how a diver could recover a cannon, and I gave them a fairly convoluted way of doing that. The Cultural Heritage Agency in the Netherlands did interviews in the Netherlands too, and the story's been picked up across the world. I was really, really delighted it even made the CBBC news round, thus reaching the potential next generation of divers. Getting to this point has been a major achievement, but what is next? Well, we know it works in benign environments, but now we need to go back to the wrecks we've marked next summer and check it's still there. If funding wasn't an issue, and this weekend we've heard how often it is an issue, but if the funding was there and it was possible, I'd love to be able to go, recover an item and do a mock forensic investigation, perhaps working with university students to see how they can find it, to see how enforcement authorities can find the products. If this all goes well, we've got a major breakthrough in marine protection and a quick low-cost solution to aiding enforcement. As well as diver deployment, which we focused on to this point, we were also developing a method to cover large areas quickly. This is currently in development and will undergo testing in due course. The interest of the Dutch stems from the large-scale destruction of Dutch war losses through the action of commercial salvors, targeting wrecks for their scrap value. We've all seen those images. The normal method of deployment is diver deployment, and that wouldn't work on large-scale sites. So the investment for the Dutch has allowed for the development of a method for rapid deployment on large deep water sites. And it's envisaged that may take the form of biodegradable packages suitable to be deployed by ROV. However, that's not confirmed yet. What is clear though is we're almost there and all the signs are it works. Will we be seeing it deployed on sites, on all sites and lots of these signs underwater in future? I don't know yet, but I really do hope we will. The final thing I want to talk to you about today, very quickly, is a project that has been undertaken by Mike Williams and Jason Lowther at the University of Plymouth, with support from Becky at MSDS and funding from Historic England, and that's the Common Enforcement Manual. It's been a really incredibly important project, and I want to say that Mike and Jason are happy for me to talk about it here today. I'm not stealing their thunder, I have asked them that. The idea behind the Common Enforcement Manual is that those who work in marine enforcement in general, such as Border Force and the police, they don't have a great deal of training or knowledge relating to heritage legislation, nor is it possible to remember every single detail of REC legislation, especially, as we've heard, where there are multiple acts within a region, and Peter did a great job of summing that all up yesterday. Additionally, those working in marine enforcement are usually first responders, so they're reacting to an incident in the marine environment where they're subject to all the environmental conditions that go along with that. So they could be on a boat that's going up and down, they could have limited access to the internet. It may be hard to believe, but until now, there has been no one tool to aid enforcement agencies in respect to law and procedure in relation to intelligence gathering and reporting, enforcement powers and their use, as well as with guidance to the idiosyncrasies of marine cultural assets and their culture and value. And there's quite a lot of those idiosyncrasies. The Common Enforcement Manual aims to do just that in a definitive and user-friendly tool in the form of a searchable internet-based tool. What's important though is the tool will be able to be downloaded to overcome circumstances where there's no reliable internet connectivity at sea. We all know you cannot rely on having a phone signal or internet at most of the protected REC locations. The manual is designed to be incredibly user-friendly. It uses a series of questions and flowcharts to guide enforcement authorities in their decision-making, and it enables quick access to advice that is applicable to the current situation they're dealing with. First responders will not usually be carrying out the investigations. The first people on the site are there to gather intelligence and evidence of potential offences so that they can be provided to the relevant authorities to follow up. The manual uses a series of links and flow diagrams to direct users to the relevant action that needs to be taken, along with details of those people that need to be contacted. It also contains up-to-date information on protected REC sites. It's set out geographically so that officers can look up protected heritage assets in the area they're patrolling. It's intended to support all of the other initiatives, including those I've talked about today, and others, which I haven't, like the Masked Maritime Observatory, which whilst I haven't talked about, those of you at last year's conference in Dublin will remember the brilliant presentation that Giles gave us on it. The Common Enforcement Manual really will be an incredible tool for enforcement. The University of Plymouth have submitted their final version of the manual to Historic England, and it's hoped this will be online soon, really incredibly soon for people to be able to use. We really are in the best place possible at any point in the last 50 years to tackle marine heritage crime, and I am optimistic for the future. We're lucky to have a number of really proactive heritage crime officers who are making a difference on the ground. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Julian Fry in Devon and Cornwall Police. I don't know if he's here today, but if you are, Julian, thank you. And all those other police heritage specialists who are really making a difference. I also want to flag that the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists have launched a Heritage Crime Special Interest Group, which is chaired by Paul Jeffrey from Historic England. Now, for those of you who don't know him, Paul is absolutely brilliant, and I'm confident the group will achieve really great things under his leadership. Non-CIFA members can join the group for a small fee each year, so do have a look or contact me if you would like more information. You can also scan the QR code there. The success of all of these initiatives will only be seen in years to come, but I really am hopeful that the next 50 years of protection, and by that I very much mean protection from heritage crime and its effects, not from the environment, from underfunding and all of the other issues, but protection from heritage crime looks really incredibly positive. I look forward to the day I can stand here again, well, I'm actually sitting, but hopefully I'll be standing next time in person, and tell you all about our first successful prosecution resulting in everything I've talked about today. So thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for wrapping us up with a positive future. Is that Jenny in the picture?
It is indeed.
Ah, she's celebrating. Looks brilliant. Do you want to start your camera? Then, and if I stop if you stop your screen sharing, then we'll be able to see you on the screen. And then we've got some time for some questions. Actually, let's... I appreciate that this question and answer session may be the no comment, but we'll see. And I'm gonna kick off with one that might be a no comment. Here we go. From one of our delegates in the Q&A. I'm a conservator. Have you consulted us? And I'm assuming Paul means with conservators. Applied to an iron cannon, I can remove the concretion, presumably with a hammer. You mentioned acid. Have you tried methylene chloride, bleach, and solvents? Now, again, this may be a no comment, and feel free to do.
I can't say everything, but yes, we have a conservator who is on our team. We work really closely with Historic England's conservators too. Whilst some of the products may be moved, it will not remove evidence from them. And I can't say much more than that, but it's all about chain of evidence. And I am confident that those issues, removing any concretion with solvents or a hammer, will still leave evidence. And so I'm quite happy that we have thought about that.
Okie dokie. Dave says, let's hope you actually don't need a successful prosecution, but that might be wishful thinking possibly, but
I agree. And can I just pick up on something Leon said in the chat about if you move to prosecution, you'll have to declare science of the court? Yeah, absolutely we will. But what we want to do is try and keep it quiet until then. So we're well aware that this is, until we have that first prosecution, we want to keep it quiet. When it comes out in court, it moves a different phase of the project. And maybe we'll be developing things alongside this so that sort of when we get to that point, there'll be other things coming through. And we've got some ideas about future marking methods that we're currently investigating at the moment.
Just to explain to others who won't have seen Leon's question, because it's only been to the host and the panelists, he basically asked, and Leon's is a solicitor, so Leon, is a legal eagle. How will you keep the composition detection mechanism secret going forwards once deployed? Because if you move to prosecution, you'll have to declare the science to court. Hence Alison's reply. But he also asks, and actually this has been asked of us because being our involvement with the Klein Hollandia site, and I kind of feel that because of the Holland connection as well, and the Klein Hollandia site, which has been part of the trials, the protective marking trials, and has been trawled through, I kind of feel maybe I'm a sort of a bad omen. So heritage crime following me around. Anyways, he also says, what happens about lawful visitors to the site? Will NES members and divers visiting these protected wrecks end up with marked kit in their suits following the protected wreck days?
So... right, I don't even know where to start with this one, because some of it is about sort of how you get marked with it in the first place. Yes, potentially, depending on what you're doing. But if you've got a lawful reason to be there, you've always got a lawful reason to be there, and you wouldn't even know that you had that marking on you anyway, and you would be named on a license. So I think it kind of doesn't matter necessarily. And I have to say, each protected marking is unique to a protected site as well. I don't think that's giving too much away. So you would have that license which said you could be on that site.
Yeah, Leon, we've had these conversations with colleagues at MSDS and at the RCE and Historic England about, do you make people aware that it's on the site or not? Because if you make people aware it's on the site, you're going to reduce the risk of things potentially being taken. So it's interesting that the decision's been made not to make people aware about the other sites, which I find quite interesting, that it's because then it's almost as if I know, and I'm sure this isn't the case, but it's almost as if you're hoping for something to be done so that a prosecution could go by not declaring which other sites it's been used on.
I don't think it's quite that. I just think by not declaring which of the sites it's being used on, it's more of a deterrent across.
Yeah.
That's very much my take on it, Mark.
Yeah. Across the board. It's like, well, it could be anything. It could be any of them. Yeah, I like it. Okay, fair enough. Christine says, fascinating. Is the marking agent suitable for just metals, or can it be used on stone, wood, even ceramics and textiles? And will a patent be applied for? And if that was the case, would it be owned by MSDS?
Don't start me on patents. That's well, there's certain law, VAT, those horrible things which make me want to cry, and everyone who knows me knows that. And that's one of those things. Ultimately, it's a Historic England project. They commissioned the project. From the MSDS angle, our view is that we want to make this as cheaply and quickly available to everybody, because it is such a game changer. It's not there for us. It's not a money-making thing for us. It can be applied to everything. And they're pretty cool, I have to say.
I from a personal perspective, I would say that our very first visit on the Klein Hollandia in 2024 should be to go and look to see how they fared over the winter and whether or not deployment of chemical material needs to be done again then, not waiting till the summer. It needs to be done in April so that it then see how long it lasts. Dave says, have you deposited test samples on the sites that you will recover for lab analysis next season?
The test samples were done in the harbour environment, so we've marked real world archaeology. My big plan that I would really, really, really like to happen is to be able to recover a cannon potentially with Bournemouth University and get their students to actually do the recovery and analysis. There's a forensic archaeology sort of course at Bournemouth as well, and actually do a real world investigation of it. Whether or not that will happen, it's early days at the moment. We need the funding to make that.
What about with Cranfield? Because they already do a field method sort of heritage crime investigation course, don't they?
They do, but because this is Maritime and we've got this link with Bournemouth as well on one of the sites potentially.
Start there.
Yeah. There's potential to work with everyone. I like working with everyone.
Yes, Dave, in answer to your question, you can detect it underwater. You don't need to recover the samples in order to detect it's on there. Okie dokie. So lots of well done, really interesting, exciting. I think I think this I described, I think, as giving real peace of mind to a licensee or to somebody working, because you're not on site all the time. You're definitely not over winter. So to know that it's there as a potential deterrent, I think, is brilliant. But do you know, I think the other game changer at some point in the future has got to be AIS tracking on fishing vessels in terms of the threats. If you're looking at what are the threats to, if we're going to pigeonhole or box what the threats are, that's got to be one of them. And the fact that AIS tracking isn't required on fishing vessels. But
as with all of this, it's just one of a suite of tools, because if you've got the AIS tracking, you've got the Maritime Observatory, who are getting that information, then you get to your fishing vessel and it's dragged its nets across the seabed. This forensic marking product will be all over those nets, so it ties up that chain of evidence for court. That's the point. Not one of these things works in isolation. They all work together.
Mike says not AIS but VMS cannot be turned. Anyway, I'm going to try and see if I can earn another pint here by putting up my there we go, my site security champion cards for the Unknown Wreck off Eastbourne, now the Klein Hollandia and Normans Bay. That's 2 pints, surely. That's 2 pints.